All right, we're live. Okay. Jeremy, so I have the three Korean police videos you sent me.
Mhm.
Um, should I just start with the first one, or did anybody want to talk about anything before I hit play on this?
Is it the first one the driver?
Yeah.
Okay, unless anybody else wants to start with something.
Um,
Seems more interesting to our viewers to show the media.
gotcha. Okay, let's just hit play on this. This one's only a minute, so we'll hit play and then
Is
we'll
Matthew making too much noise, by the way?
nope.
Okay.
Nope. Okay.
Nope.
Here we go.
Should I translate?
Oh, that's the end of it.
I thought maybe there was music playing from the car that was crashing, but then I realized that the
Oh,
news was giving us a soundtrack.
yeah. This one is really like one of these media clips or whatever that subtitles don't really provide any good information. They're saying stuff like the drunk driver inside a parking garage, like it's like exactly what you can see, but it's like these
What I love
TMZ
about this
kind
clip, man, what I love about this clip is like often there's a presumption that we have a higher danger of someone pulling a firearm or something. In this case, we have someone in a weapon, right, in a vehicle, and they're not being killed at the wheel as we like throwing it around like it's a like they could crash into anyone. If he turned to the side, he would suddenly crush an officer. And our officers would not ever tolerate that level of risk. Like if you're acting like that in your vehicle, they're gonna kill you.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. That's why this one really stood out for me. And you can contrast it not even with examples that are remotely like this with the use of the vehicle, actually, you know, going forward and backward with enough strength to smash pieces off other vehicles, but just cases where you know some suspect is starting to drive away like relatively slowly, and maybe the door. There's one case where the McDonald's drive-through case, but got some notoriety. It's like young white kid, um, where basically the driver's side door barely bumped the cop, and that was the use of the vehicle as a deadly weapon that justified the cop shooting the guy. So there's a lot of cases like this where the use of the vehicle as a weapon is just much more minor. Um,
Mm.
so I thought
Yeah.
I'd
It's
point to that.
interesting. Would
Now,
there
presumably these
be?
cops probably don't have guns. They have
That's interesting too.
tasers, and they definitely have tasers. Maybe they have something else like a beanbag gun, but probably not. If it's not something like riot control, they probably just have tasers and telescoping batons.
Um,
I like how the one cop was hitting the side of the car with the baton, like that was
Yeah,
going to do anything.
the one that was smashing the window out with it?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Now that's something I would imagine your average person that maybe doesn't like the police in the U.S. would call that excessive, and I don't know if anybody in the U.S. would do that because I feel like that's in some ways more excessive than what would happen in the U.S. I think Phil's right that if the officers place themselves in a way where they could be hit, they might have the right to and they would shoot. But if they're on the sides like that, yeah, I don't know what would happen. Isaac, what do you think about what happened, how it played out? Do you think it should have played out any differently, or it would have mattered if it played out differently?
Yeah, I think the officers were not very smart here and were putting themselves in a really dangerous situation. They should not have gotten that close to that car. I think the best thing to do, given the absence of firearms, would be trying to ram the vehicle with another car. I think would have been ideal to like get it to stop in one place. I'm a little surprised they didn't do that, but yeah, I don't think they should have been that close. They could have easily died.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what professionals do. This is going to be a running theme.
Yeah,
It's what
Well,
firefighters
how
do,
much-
and it's what ER nurses do, and it's what EMTs do. And
Well, no,
it's
firefighters.
what you do when you're thinking like a professional
Well,
serving
no.
the public, and you're not thinking like a gang protecting
Yeah,
your
but
own.
yeah,
Well,
but
here's the difference.
firefighters don't risk their lives to preserve the fire, right? Firefighters risk their lives to put out the fire.
Well,
Well,
not only that, like, so
That's the good, that's the good
here's how I'd.
response. Okay,
Here's
we'll figure
yeah.
that out.
But yeah, and I was going to say something similar, like a firefighter could stand 10 feet from the fire with the hose and spray the water on it, or he could just go walk and stand in the fire and shoot the hose straight up while it just rains around him while his legs are burning. But you're going to do the thing that is going to hurt you the least while getting your job done. Now, I don't think that means you should just kill random civilians. In this case, I don't know if there's any amount of property damage that should lead to a death, property damage alone. So if the cops knew the person couldn't leave the parking garage, then yeah, I don't know if you should do anything that would take that person's life other than like what Isaac was saying is like move your cars around in a way to block them in. But if there's no threat to the officers or anyone else, then maybe you got to do some form of waiting it out, kind of like the guys that were following that guy with the machete. So I don't know exactly, but same with the fire thing. People will risk their lives to run in and grab somebody and pull them out. I would do it too, but I'm not going to risk my life to save the life of the bad guy. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing. Partly it's about, making the quick determination of who is a bad guy and who's not, and then if they're bad, how bad they are. How
So imagine
quickly different law enforcement jumps to that conclusion, and U.S. police just seem trained to have the us versus them mentality by default.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but imagine a firefighter and a fire, and inside of the house with the fire, there's like a baby as cute as Matthew. Okay, and so imagine you only have a 30% chance of getting in and out with you surviving. I would probably do that. I'd go in and try to save Matthew, even if I had a 30% chance of making it out. But if the only person that was in the fire was the arsonist that started the fire, I wouldn't do the 30% risk. If it was like I had a 90% chance of getting out, I might go save the arsonist.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna. I don't know. Am I wrong? Is that a bad call? Should I have the mindset of save anyone, even the bad guy?
No, not as an ethical consequentialist. Definitely, I don't think so. But unless like I don't believe in retributivism, but assuming we're talking about the arsonist is somebody who's the type of person who's probably going to continue being that type of person and cause like net damage in the world in the future. Then I agree with you, except that you're in these cases with police, you're talking about jumping to conclusions quickly, but significantly, I think jumping to the conclusions that paint the acting officer and their fellow officers as like an inherently superior caste of human to the other humans, more deserving of the benefit of the doubt, more deserving of extra protections for their own safety than these potential perps all around them who who the opposite of the benefit of the doubt can be assumed about, given the mildest of evidence.
I do want to point out that in the video I saw just recently, there was far less risk to the American officers to being run over when they killed the man in the car who was trying to escape his own driveway. Whereas here, as long as the driver is acting violently with his vehicle, even not headed toward an officer, if they are that close in a relatively enclosed area, I can't imagine that American officers would not have riddled that car with bullets. So you know what I mean? I think that's an important point.
I thought that this
But
one
should
would
they?
appeal to you right away,
Yeah.
in terms of the contrast.
It's something interesting to think about. Like, so I think it's called stop sticks. The things they throw out in front of a car that they're trying to stop that has like it'll pop the tires. What I'm trying to imagine is if they don't have the car contained and it's a drunk driver, they're smashing into all these cars. If they're going to try to leave the area, if you could throw out stop sticks and pop their tires, or like Isaac said, ram the cop car into them, then these things would be good. But if you can't, and they're causing all this damage, and they clearly could be a danger to anyone out on the street, and they're going to leave that parking garage, is it not? I don't know if you should necessarily shoot the person in the car, maybe the tires, but maybe you should shoot the person in the car. How do we feel if you don't shoot the person in the car, and every time this situation happens, that person that goes out on the street goes and hits a family of 4 and kills all of them or half of them? It's sadder if they kill half of them. So they kill half of the family of 4. Or, somebody's on the cross. At what point do we decide if somebody's being dangerous with their vehicle and they're going to enter an area where civilians are, that we stop them? In the same way somebody with a gun enters a mall, we would stop them. At what point do we view the actions with the vehicle as predicting the future actions?
It's not easy. And it would have to be on a case-by-case basis. I mentioned before we started recording, the risk of turning a litigious, law-obsessed, rule-obsessed attitude into a kind of pernicious legalism, is the way I used it, where if you have a rule written down and you're like, well, look, I followed the rules, and then you look at the tape and you're like, well, yeah, he followed the rules, but situations are so complex. It really has to come down to, was it reasonable? So like in the case with the McDonald's drive-through, okay, so the officer got bumped by the vehicle, perhaps mistakenly, or the driver didn't even know the officer was standing next to the vehicle. All of a sudden, because of the previous case, it says, oh, if they hit you with your vehicle, you can unload the bullets into them. And that's the problem with that kind of legalism. We can't have a solid rule of like, you can always kill them when they do this.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to, I completely agree with you. I think you have to have kind of a range of what's acceptable, and you have to have maybe examples of previous cases of, see, this wasn't acceptable where this is. But you have to have something, I don't know if they call it like a police manual or something, but something where if somebody is thoroughly trained right, that when they do something, or let's say when they're about to do something, they have to know if that's acceptable. Now, they could be wrong. Something within training, even a right, good training, could have led that officer that got hit by that car door in that other video, could have led him to doing the shooting, and then he's told that's wrong and you're fired now. And that's all good. We don't have to have it written that perfectly, but we want to have it as close to as possible to the person with the job knowing you can't do this. You can't just randomly shoot somebody because they have red hair. There has to be some kind of middle ground. Like there has to be something written.
I wanted to ask you, Carson, just to clarify, when you're thinking about additional training,
Mhm.
Are you thinking primarily training in the sense of like tactics? You know, what other methods could you physically use here? How could you not be in this position to get, hit by the driver's side door or something like that? Or are you primarily thinking training in the sense of like, you know, well, these days we have woke sensitivity training, but there are versions of that that are not crazy or cultish,
Mhm.
that are actually based upon like how to deal with people. Are you thinking training in that
Yeah.
sense, like reinforcing like you are not a superior caste of human being to the people that you're interacting with?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a wild amount of training. When I said training a second ago, I probably was actually mostly referring to learning the right and wrong. So just reading the manual of what's acceptable, what's not, what the laws are. But it could be a range of things, like knowing that you could some kid on the street could like flip you off and start cussing at you, and then you have to know that you have to stay relaxed. Like they have their their rights to say super shitty stuff. Like basically like the First Amendment auditors. I think police need to be trained to know like any type of thing those guys could come up with to put you through. You just have to realize like this is part of my job. I have to put up with this shit. And but then all kinds. I mean, there's so many different kinds of training. I mean, there's training of knowing how to be a really good shot. There's training to know how to use your taser. I agree with Sam Harris that officers should probably be trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm no expert on this kind of stuff, but I really think
Spoilers, a little bit of foreshadowing there.
oh but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different training, but I think one of the most important things is to know what the manual says. Like, so when the Derek Chauvin and George Floyd thing went down, and there was like the knee on the neck situation and the knee on the back. Obviously, there's going to be cases, not that one, but there will be cases where what's needed is to put pressure on somebody's neck or back or shoulder area with a knee, and that happens all the time. And the criminal doesn't usually die from it. And there needs to be something written down that says what is acceptable and not acceptable. So you probably can't hold your knee on somebody's face, especially if that's a 5-month-old baby. So there'll be a level of like different things that are acceptable. And I just
I was thinking, not now, but thinking, this thought has crossed my mind a while ago, about dealing with this legality and stuff,
Mhm.
Where, of course it's considered acceptable in the US for a cop to shout, follow my orders, and then if somebody's not following their orders and doing anything remotely violent, to shoot them. And shooting is very noisy, but it satisfies the legal standard. But I was wondering about these cases, like possible cases. If there's like a mass shooting with multiple perpetrators, and like some police have like one of the guys, you call it a suspect, but where it's really obvious, like they've got the weapons there on them and they're witness doing it, and the cops don't want to let the accomplice know either that this one perpetrator has been taken out or their location. You guys think aside from what the legal repercussions would be, you think it's morally acceptable for the cops to like choke the guy out, just get a garrote and just kill him silently
Um,
in order to save lives and have better control over the situation?
Dillian in the comments was asking about a certain case, so I was looking it up and I missed part of what you said. So I'm going to let Isaac answer your question.
Yeah, sorry, could you just re-clarify again?
Yeah. So I'm just talking about ways of killing other than the normal, legally accepted way of gunfire. So I'm picturing a situation where silence is really important. Multiple perpetrator, mass shooting, something that gets closer to military type situations. In a military situation, if you wanted to, you're like a SEAL team or something wanting to protect your position, then of course you would like silently choke out and kill an enemy combatant that way. I wonder if you think it'd be morally acceptable for cops, in order to keep the other perpetrators from knowing their location, to just choke a guy or kill him silently in some other way that's less normal.
For me, there's no difference. So yeah, I think it'd be completely okay. For if I could imagine like a situation where there's like mass shooters or whatever, and they like come up behind one and just like stab them or something like that, so that they don't reveal their location to the other one. So I think that does make sense to me, and I think it can totally be morally fine, and I don't see a difference between that and using a gun. So
my answer would be, if we stick to the hypothetical of really that's the only difference, is the visceral, like looking at an officer using a garrote to like saw off someone's jugular, that wouldn't make a difference to me. Although I would say, if the officer is able to do that, then it's likely to not be the same sort of situation. Like, he probably could subdue him another way. Although you said it's for silence, so that does throw a wrench into it. It would have to be an extreme situation, like multiple mass shooters. So.
Yeah. I'm trying to play it out too. I'm trying to imagine it with different scenarios where there's like, I don't know, two people robbing some place or whatever, and both have a gun, and so I think it would come down to something like mass shooters and knowing that there are.
I brought it up because this analogy with the military seems very significant in U.S. policing, and yet it only sort of gets made part way. Police will talk about being in war zone, and they'll talk about the weaponry that criminals have, and they're using it, as an explanation for the quick escalation of situations, and just especially for the default attitude that they could be dealing with a dangerous criminal at any stop or whatever, that's supposedly comparable to soldiers in an actual war zone inside enemy territory or something like that. But then they don't apply it all the way, so there's still all sorts of things that the cops aren't going to do, other than the most extreme, like long lasting active situation that soldiers regularly do in a battle. So it's kind of interesting how that analogy gets made and plays such an important role, but it doesn't get made all the way. Like they wouldn't, for example, like set fire to a building, which soldiers would definitely do if that was a way to deal with enemies that were inside. Use fire as a tool.
They do that in "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?"
Oh yeah.
Waco, you mean?
Yeah. That's great stuff. Oh man. Okay, so before we go to the next video, I just want to get a quick idea from each of you of how you think what the range of how that situation should have went down. That one that we just watched with the crashing of the cars. Phil, what do you think the range of options should look like in a situation like that?
Oh, in that situation in the car garage?
Yeah.
Any time that an officer decides, I'm not going to use deadly force, and it works out okay, I'm not going to go back. I've seen officers get fired for not using deadly force when they thought they didn't have to, and it turns out they didn't have to, but they didn't follow the procedure because the guy was pointing a gun at them. He thought it was unloaded. Turns out it was unloaded. So everybody's life was saved. But no, you did the wrong thing, so you're you're fired. You should have shot him in that situation. Like, to me, that's crazy. Anytime an officer chooses to not use deadly force, I don't punish them, right? So the way it worked out there, it was perfectly fine. But that's already way over the threshold of using deadly force for our officers, which I think is appropriate. And the civilians have to know that if you're charging around a garage and at any moment you could turn the wheel and pin an officer and kill him against the wall, they're going to kill you. So I think the range of behavior that was available to the officers there and justifiable to the officers is a huge range.
So really
Gotcha.
quick, just to go back to my the phrasing of my proposed vote, one of my proposed votes, same standard for ordinary citizens who are legal open carry or concealed carry firearm holders. If I'm nearby and potentially the target of a rampaging vehicle that's hitting other vehicles, it's okay for me to open fire.
Absolutely not. And I did oppose that law.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you want to explain that if my life is in danger, why I can
Because
fire on somebody who's endangering my life because they're trying to mug me, but I can't open fire on somebody who might kill me with their car.
there's a difference between the behavior of someone who, like, you just may happen to be next to them, right? Versus they're next to an officer who's ordering them to stop. And see, I've heard you in the past say that this means officers are like some kind of special class of citizen who has extra rights. And what it really is, it's when they put on the uniform, they're advertising themselves as a threat to criminals, as a threat to anyone around them, where that officer could take away their freedom, right? And so they then become a target. He's trying to escape the officers, and he might be willing to hurt one of them to do that. It doesn't put the officer in a situation where they're treated like a better kind of citizen with more rights if they have the responsibility to enforce the law, and part of that is using their sidearm. Yeah.
Well, and I'll put on top of that what you were saying, Jeremy. So if you were at risk and couldn't get away, yes, I think you should be able to, but only in self-defense or in defense of others if you saw a direct threat. But in this case, with seeing the guy crash, if you can run away, then no, I don't think you should be allowed to kill. I think you should run. And then, but with the cops, they're not running, they're staying. And so
But
they're
what if
staying
what if
because-
somebody gets killed? What if exactly the consequentialist defense that you guys used? What if
we
I
we
let
have
this
police
person get away because I don't shoot, and then they kill somebody on the street? I'm not responsible for that.
unless
Somebody
we
got
were
run over
able to
because of
turn
my,
every
my inaction.
yeah, unless we are able to turn every citizen into police, I just don't think it's worth the risk. I don't think it takes training to have a policy in place that would say if this car leaves this car garage after crashing a handful of times, it's worth killing them versus letting them be on the streets with this weapon. If that's in place and the officers know it, the officers can make that call and kill the person. I'm not saying that should be in place. I'm just saying hypothetically it is. Whereas if a civilian didn't go to train to read the manual to know that this isn't worth the risk, and they're all like, I thought about it in my own civilian brain, and I thought maybe they could go kill somebody, so I killed them for fun. Not for fun, but like sort of for fun, because I think they would have been a threat. I think there's a difference between your government and your law enforcement having a decision of what a threat is versus anybody choosing their own threats. People would just be randomly taking out people for random reasons and calling it a threat. I think that's why I think there's a difference there. And civilians can only kill in direct self-defense or self-defense of others.
Okay.
Well, let's look at
direct self-defense of others. What if my neighbor's loading a bunch of guns and ammo into his truck, and then I have a handgun, and then just as he's like getting in the door, he says to me, "I'm going to shoot up a school." Then if I can't like grab him because he's starting to drive away, but if I don't shoot him, then or are you saying I shouldn't shoot him
Yeah,
because that's
we
not
can find
direct
wonky edge
defense?
cases.
I'm
Yeah,
not sure. I'm
I
not sure what
don't.
direct means.
Well, so in my mind, self-defense and defense of others would be involving direct defense. Whereas if somebody's like coming at you or attacking you or something like that, now a verbal threat about others, the complicated thing, it's complicated, but I don't know. Maybe. But real quick before we get too far into that, I was curious what Phil was about to say.
Well, I was going to say that I think what's most useful is just continuing the firefighter and the criminal element being the fighter. We can continue that analogy the whole way, right? So we can find an edge case where you actually would expect a random civilian to put out a fire if it's really dry out and the fire is just starting and you have a jug of water. It's like you're doing something really disturbing by not putting out that fire while it's very small, just starting to smoke and kindle. Just as you would be doing something really disturbing by not at least calling someone after this mass shooter said he's going to go shoot up someplace, you know. Whereas you don't expect, like, for our analogy of like, is it okay for a random civilian to shoot someone who's crashing into cars in the parking garage, right? He's raging around the parking garage crashing. That's sort of like, what if there was a fire in the building, in, let's say, the parking garage? Why move it, right? So a fire in the parking garage, and should every civilian sort of take it upon themselves to go grab the fire extinguisher and fight the fire? I don't think it's their responsibility.
Every probably able-bodied civilian who clearly sees where the fire extinguisher is and knows how to use one, et cetera, I would feel like I'm personally morally culpable if I had a clear path to doing something like that and didn't take it. So that's my answer there.
I know we can
that's not a hard bullet to bite.
Yes, we can craft it in such a way where, rather than the guy going around because the situation you're describing where there's clearly a fire that's going to hurt people, that's more of a situation where, let's say, the guy, rather than having a car and hitting other cars, he's in the car and he's hitting other people, right? It's probably a better analogy because the fire there absolutely is threatening to possibly kill people. So there I would say that makes sense to shoot the person in the car. But that's changing the analogy a little because our level of uncertainty is changing. So, yeah.
Let's hop over to Isaac real quick. Isaac, what do you have any different thoughts than Phil or whatever on what the range of acceptability would be in this case of the video we saw?
Are we going back to the car one, or are we talking about okay? So yeah, I think that I guess that same thing earlier. I think that the police officers were unnecessarily putting their lives in danger. They should have just found a way to block the car in and wait it out. I do think that, in that case, lethal force would have been justified but just because the cops were kind of stupid and in danger. If the cops weren't in danger, then lethal force would not have been. And I'm also assuming that the parking garage has been evacuated. There's no other civilians there, in which case acting in a bit more of an extreme manner would be okay. But overall, I think that, they should not have done what they did. They should have just found a way to stay away from it and to, keep it isolated until they stop driving around. So.
Gotcha. And just to check really quick, at what point you might think it's fine to use the lethal force. Let's say that the car crashed into another car in the parking garage and then just stayed there, didn't move at all, and police were called, police show up. Everything else is clear. There's nobody else in this parking garage. Well, let's say there's a bunch of cars, but there's no people hanging out. I wouldn't think they'd be able to shoot the person at that point because they haven't moved yet. But does it become a thing where it's acceptable to shoot once they start backing into or going forward, sort of near a direction of an officer? Or would it be the amount of like cars they hit with the possibility of leaving the building or the parking garage?
For me, it's only if there is like a clear imminent danger of someone's life. Then that's the only time it's ever okay for lethal force. So
Okay.
yeah, I guess if maybe like they were backing up really quickly and then there's like someone behind them, civilian or police officer, doesn't make a difference to me. Like then it'd be okay. But yeah, I think that should be a last resort. That should very rarely be used.
Okay. And then, Jeremy, do you think they should be obligated to take the amount of risk that these specific Koreans took? Or do you think they should just be obligated to not take lethal force, but they could have distanced themselves more?
It depends what level of obligation you mean.
Well, so for example, I think the three of myself, Isaac, and Phil are saying that they risk their lives a bit more than we feel like they should have. Somebody
Moral.
that is accepting of, they're risking their own life or whatever. Like I don't think the job should call for that much risk, and even if the job allowed that kind of risk, some might take it, some might not, but I don't think anybody should be told, if you don't get as close as these guys do in this video to this vehicle, then you're not doing the job right and you're fired. So I'm
Okay.
curious to know.
So
if
that's
you
all. That's
think-
all I wanted to know.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to know. You're talking about criminal liability, or you're talking about professional consequences like suspension without pay or being fired, or are you talking about just general moral obligation, the sense of what your duty is and what the right thing to do is?
Mhm.
Talking about professional sanctions, professional standards, which probably connected to what the training would be. That's hard to say. I mean, my kind of overarching point is that in other developed nations, things are done very differently, and the statistical consequences seem pretty good by comparison, and also, public attitudes toward police seem much more favorable as well. So I'm not going to. I don't think that I've seen enough here to second guess the training and the protocol of South Korean police for sure.
Well, I'm just saying, should they be obligated to be as close as they were? It played out
I
nice.
think it's important that training be sufficiently uniform that one officer can reliably predict what kinds of things other officers are going to do, in order to have a coordinated action. So in that sense, if as part of that professional culture that this is what the others are expecting you to do in order for the coordinated action to have a shot at working, then you should feel professionally obligated to do it yourself. Because if you have this situation where the swarming sort of thing happens, maybe it's a little different in this parking garage case, but you have only one person trying to go up to that car and the others were keeping their distance, choosing to do that, then it seems like the likely outcome for that one individual would be a lot less promising, right? You need coordination, and that implies a sort of responsibility to be part of the team, following the team plan.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. One example I'd have would be something like the Uvalde shooting. So you have the guy with the gun in the classroom. You got kids in the classroom. You got officers down the hall. Guys firing through the door. Bullets are going down the hall. So options would be walk into bullets and likely get hit to try to break through and get in. And like, so in my mind, that it's one of the first times I started having a channel at all talking about stuff was defending the Uvalde cops, because like, I don't think police officers should have to take like an extreme risk like that, where some people might think they should. But if somebody is a daredevil and they don't mind their lives being risked at all, I think that's totally fine, and they can do that. I see a little bit of a concern. But you should have your obligations. You should have specific things that you do have to do. And I wouldn't think that would be walking towards bullets and trying to like dodge them like the Flash. But in that case, if everybody's doing what they're obligated to do, they're where they are. They can't just go home and take a nap because there's a shooting. They have to be there. They have to follow protocol. They have people setting up a perimeter. They have all these different things going on. But if one thing that could happen that they aren't obligated to do would be run down the hall, kick in the door, and cross your fingers that it's like the Pulp Fiction shootout, then that person can do that, and that's fine. They'll likely die. But if they don't die, we can look at it and go, wow, that actually turned out really great. And so I guess I was just wondering if that's how you felt about this one, where they could risk their lives if they want, but if they're told you have to risk your life, then that's fine too. They just that would just be part of the job title. Like when you take that job, you know that this is how much of your life you have to risk. And if a guy was 10 feet away from the car and didn't get closer, that when it's caught on video, they'd go, oh, you were 10 feet away and you should have been closer. You were supposed to risk yourself. You're fired now. I'm fine with that. I would just want to know that detail.
You know,
you don't have to
much
say
I-
anything further. I was
guess
just kind of give.
close
Yeah.
to the latter. You know, they seem to describe themselves that way when it's job day at the elementary school, as people who are putting their lives and their safety on the line for public safety and
Mhm.
as public servants. And
Well, they
I don't know.
When
I
they
don't
go
know
in
that
an area,
you know. Well, you know, but then there's all these cases where then they turn around and they use the exact opposite reasoning as defense for really greatly and quickly devaluing the lives of others who are not of their tribe, of their caste. You know, and you're not shaking my belief that they are acting like a superior caste in you know how they treat one another and defense of one another versus defense of people who are outsiders in group out.
I don't know about that's a whole
And
separate
what
talk. I don't know
have-
anything about.
I don't know how there has to be like a specific rule that says you must always risk your life. You know, does there have to be?
Mhm.
I mean, for like a smoke jumper, you know, wilderness firefighter, or like an EMT who would have to go out onto a highway, you know, where there's like wreckage of vehicles and other dangerous things.
There's a lot less of a risk with those other things. So like if you have a fire, you know there's a fire, you want to put it out, but that fire is not going to grab a gun and shoot at you. So that fire is just where it is, and you can do your absolute best to put it out. And
But here's the other thing,
certain amount of
Carson.
your life.
You've said that sort of thing many times. You've made that disanalogy. The fire is not going to shoot at you. The fire doesn't have criminal intent. But that you know, see, that's making the assumption and creating the asymmetry of value. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The different castes of people. Because there's another crucial disanalogy, which is that the fire is not a sentient being that can be harmed, suffer, die, be abused, be maimed by the firefighter. The firefighter can't cause negative consequences to the fire.
Correct.
Putting out a fire, okay, you can put out a fire and metaphorically you do harm to the fire, but the fire is not something that can suffer harm.
Yeah.
So, but the people, the non-cops who cops are dealing with are sentient beings who can be and are harmed. So,
Correct.
so there's your other disanalogy. These aren't these aren't just they're not a cast of perps who can potentially harm the officers, and that's it. They're human beings who may or may not be perps who can be harmed by the officers.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if you are not
that's what
if
people
you
like
are
me
not
are
a criminal,
emphasizing.
if you are not a criminal with a weapon like a car or a gun or a knife or various different things, and you comply when it comes to police officers, I don't even know what those odds are of dying or getting shot at all. Like we're talking, like I mean,
They're there.
less than
just
one in a
extremely
trillion.
small.
It's it's like it's practically unheard of.
Comply
but
is
I get you.
comply is just so the problem is that comply is just increasingly maybe I don't know. It seems to be a weasel word to get around all kinds of escalation and abuse, you know. Especially I can just think about like the physical reflex kind of motions that are interpreted as non-compliance in video after video. You know, somebody just grabs your arm and tries to wrench them behind your back while trying to cuff you, and then if you even like instinctively try to like free your arm or try to adjust in response to like your shoulder being wrenched, that's taken as non-compliance. There are lots of other cases like that. Just people's natural instinctive reaction to being tossed around like a rag doll. And
I agree. All that should be worked on. Almost every cop video I ever see, good or bad, it's usually like put your hands behind your back, and they don't, and they're fighting the cop off, and the cop has to grab their arm, and then they're doing this like crazy shit, and then it's almost always in my mind, it seems like I don't care if these people, if their arms break or if their wrists break, they need to have handcuffs on them, because we would have chaos if
but then
if
you
they
have
didn't.
the language issue, and then you have the mental illness issue. You have, even if there's not a lack of shared language, there can still be other kinds of linguistic miscommunication, especially involving officers shouting contradictory orders, or just shouting it really fast, you know, and not really
all that
checking
stuff
for
should
an
be
indication
fixed.
of comprehension. But yeah, like the apparently schizophrenic guy shouting in Spanish about Jesus, you know,
with a
then the
machete.
officers-
He was waving around a machete and being crazy. I don't think you should die because you're crazy. But if you are crazy and you're not in a home and you have a machete out in public, at some point you should die.
I hate to change the subject too much, but do you think that some of this might be helped, at least with the translation issue? It's probably irrelevant, but I think we're on the edge of language differences being almost irrelevant, because we can suddenly now have instantaneous translations, which right now are just in our phones, but they're about to be, you know, loud and could be anywhere at any time.
I remember I said in the chat, Phil, you know, I don't even speak Spanish. I am a foreign language teacher, and I do speak a few languages, but I'm pretty sure that there's some things that I could at least try saying to a apparently schizophrenic Christian guy who has in his mind that he's a warrior for Jesus, that would have a pretty decent chance of getting him to put down the machete.
Do you think there's anything that could have been said to him?
Like, Jesus no hay violencia, like violencia no, you know?
But you think anything would have got that guy to put his machete
And I
down?
could say like, hey, amigo, violencia no. You know?
Yes. Realistically, though, I'm curious. Do you really think that there is a human word by anybody of any skin color, any ability to speak perfectly? There are any human words that could have gotten that guy to put his machete down?
You could tell him.
You mean like treating a human as a machine that with 100% reliability is going to respond to your
No. I'm saying, do you even think if that guy's mother? Do you even think if that guy's mother was there and could know the best words to say to that guy in Spanish, would have got that guy to put his machete down?
Yeah,
I think
he's-
that's absurd to think
he's
that guy
in-
would have
he's
ever put
he's
that
in
down.
some kind of schizophrenic episode where he thinks that he's a
Exactly.
warrior for Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, those people are not unresponsive to language. You got to speak from the mindset that they're in.
You tell him you need help because Diablo is around the corner. Follow him. Diablo's over here.
You tell him Jesus wouldn't want you to go kill people. Jesus is like peace and love. So
Oh, that's better.
You
Yeah.
know. you know,
I mean,
Follow-
I'm not saying it's impossible. I just from what I saw in that video, which my first thought was you need to find somebody that speaks Spanish. Hopefully, an officer can show up that speaks Spanish. But I wouldn't guess it would do anything. It would just be the best first step. But who knows? I mean, I can't magically know that. I just happen to think I'm right.
I mean,
Oh, go for it.
I'm not denying that you can eventually go to lethal force with a gun when somebody has a machete and is coming at you. I never denied that. What I said, what I objected to in that video is the immediate escalation of shouting at him, loud, aggressive, fast, and in a language that he doesn't obviously speak. And essentially just used as a legal cover for what the cop was getting ready to do.
That's my biggest issue is I think you just have this negative feeling. Like you want to think that these random police officers that happen to work on a Tuesday together, all like secretly 20 years before just said, you know what? I want to be an officer so I can kill somebody. And
No,
I'm going
I
to come
didn't
up with
say
the
that.
best cover and I'm not
I
going to
didn't
kill anybody
imply
for...
that. I didn't imply
Okay.
that.
When you said the cover, I misinterpreted.
No, the training is to get these words out quickly enough, and that training is in place out of a training philosophy of protect one another, protect the our brothers and sisters in blue, protect them from harm, physical direct harm, and also protect them from liability.
That's the
As the
pernicious
underlying
legal.
yeah, and that's a sick, deranged underlying philosophy for the training of professional public servants.
Okay. I mean, and that could be a whole separate talk as well, and that's interesting for sure. So I got to get out of here in about 10 minutes. And so I'm gonna show this video real quick that I want. I think I rambled on too long earlier, so I got in the way of our video watching. But I want to go over this video, which is only 1 minute, and then at some other point we can go over the 2 other Korean ones. But then if you guys want to stay in chat after I head out, I'll just leave this up.
We can't
But,
even watch the second one. Okay, I hope you guys will stay with me and watch it.
Okay. The second
Okay.
one, the 1 minute one or the fight one.
The fight one.
Okay, I was gonna say like I'm actually convinced that it's staged, but I could be wrong, and Phil might have convinced me that I'm wrong. But,
Yeah, in chat I said it looks staged, but it's not.
yeah, but yeah, we'll that one's too long to go over, so I just want to watch this real quick, and then we can chat about it, and then I got to head out in 10 minutes so my wife doesn't kill me. We're redoing some floors in there, so okay, here we go.
Just into our newsroom tonight, brand new body-worn camera footage showing the shocking moment when a Jacksonville sheriff's officer is stabbed with a butcher knife. This happened on Easter Sunday, and it led to the fatal police shooting of Leah Baker, a woman family members say suffered from a mental illness. All Your Side's Ann Schindler obtained the video earlier today and brings us this report tonight, and I do have a warning for you. While this video is edited and blurred, some of you might find it disturbing to watch.
Easter Sunday, just after 5 p.m. JSO responded to the 1300 block of Gulfair Boulevard.
What the
Leah Baker came at Officer E. Meckling without warning
I just been stabbed!
and continued to after Meckling fired several rounds.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Shots fired!
A second officer, J.S.
Okay.
Nobles, arrived
Get on the ground! Get away from that knife!
and fired multiple shots at Baker. But she continues to ignore police commands and even begins punching the police canine.
Let go of my dog!
Baker was later pronounced dead at a hospital. Her case is one of 14 officer-involved shootings recently deemed justified by the state attorney's office. Ann Schindler, First Coast News, on your side.
So, you know, if it was me, I would shoot somebody who had just stabbed me, and I wouldn't even feel any need whatsoever to shout, "Get on the ground!" Comply with my orders. Get on the ground. So that's one of the interesting aspects of that to me, is that this kind of training of create the legal protection for the retaliatory shooting is very interesting, when you were literally just stabbed seconds ago and the person still has a knife and is still
Do you
coming
think
at
it's
you.
creating a legal protection? I just don't buy that. Like, you think I just don't know what you mean by that. Like,
What's she
anytime
doing? She's actually thinking that she's going to get this person to comply, and
yeah.
Okay. Well, then great. Then that's a very noble person.
Maybe I'm just naive. I don't know. Maybe I just hope for the best. But you say get on the ground in hopes that they'll get on the ground. I mean, in that split second, we're talking from when she got stabbed to when she said that.
Yeah.
We're talking
Oh,
less
sure.
than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So in her
That's a
mind,
good point.
she's not thinking schizophrenic. This person will never listen to anything. They're going to start biting a dog. It's just like, most people don't want to kill anybody. Even if somebody stabbed me, I would feel justified killing them. I would hope I didn't have to kill them. I would rather run away, even if I could kill them, unless I thought running away would lead them to hurting somebody else. But also, I always try to imagine my daughter being the person that ever is a victim of a situation, or sorry, even a criminal of a situation. Whenever I see homeless people, I always imagine, what if my daughter got to that level where she was on the street talking to herself? How would I want people to treat her? And so in this case, this woman comes out of here with a knife, stabs somebody, and keeps coming at people. If that was my daughter, I would hope that they were able to contain her, get her in a mental hospital, and I can visit her and I can hug her. I wouldn't want her dead, but I would feel like it's justifiable to kill her even after that first stab. But if she would have gotten on the ground, or if they tased her and handcuffed her, I love that hopefully police would be willing to try to do what that woman, the officer, did.
I would, with that in mind, with what you just said in mind, I do think it's really important, again, to look into many cases from other developed nations, especially, and look at their protocols, because I have a feeling that in the UK, there would be multiple officers who know how to take down a woman with a knife. And the original officer would have been stabbed, and while they were getting treatment, probably three other officers would have been able to swarm that situation and
Isaac looks like he hasn't thought
take
about
her down,
that.
not shoot her.
Isaac,
it's reality. It's not just somebody's pipe dream. It's it's many videos of it, and clearly training protocols that emphasize things like that.
Knives are just really, really dangerous, and it takes is one swipe. It's in a bad spot, and you're dead in minutes. So I don't think that you should rely on. I don't think that police officers should have to physically try to tackle somebody with a knife. I think that's pretty insane to me.
A lot of what they seem to do is
the level of danger.
They seem to use batons to try to knock the knife out, and then the very second that it gets knocked out of the hand before it can be picked up again, then they swarm.
And that's better.
A lot of these videos that I've seen.
I'm curious if you just took, let's even imagine a well-trained person with a baton versus your average criminal with a knife. I wonder how many dead baton holders you would have if they.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Americans just seem really ready to come up with the worst case scenario for the officers and for
I'm just trying to imagine
around in order to justify anything, which it's not in fact the apparent standard practice of many other nations that seem to be pretty good places to live in. and
Well, yeah, I don't-
aren't overridden with crime.
And that might be worth looking into. But what I'm talking about is what somebody should have to risk, no matter what country they're in, whatever. I happen to have looked in the UK, and the UK is tiny. Well, let's just say England. England is tiny compared to the US, and they have more officer deaths per year than the US. Isn't
Oh, I thought
insane?
that was per capita. They have total more officer deaths.
Total more. We
Okay.
have an average of like 200 a year, and they have an average of 300 to 400 a year.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's insane. But even if it wasn't, it's complicated to look into different cultures. I mean, as we saw, those of us that saw that Korean video we didn't get a chance to watch today, when people want to get in really badass martial arts fights, at first they just push each other and slap each other for 2 minutes. So cultures are different, and so I don't know what to say about different cultures. But when I go over this kind of stuff, it's not like a America, fuck yeah. I'm just looking at it philosophically. Which is why we're doing our society project. I'm not viewing America necessarily. It's like, if I had my own society, what would I view the perfect society as? And it sure as fuck is a society that will let the law enforcement not have to hand fight somebody with a knife. Which
No
I think
swearing
you
in front
somewhat
of
agree
Matthew.
with. What's that?
No swearing in front of Matthew. Just
Oh,
kidding.
sorry, Matthew. Has Isaac seen Matthew yet?
Oh, probably.
Isaac, have you seen Matthew? Oh, okay, he's shaking.
Yes,
he's
I
saying,
have.
Yeah. Okay. He's so cute. He almost looks fake. You should try to get him in commercials, unless you think that'll mess with his life or something. Gerber
Yeah.
baby or something.
Those like cooing, gurgling noises. It sounded like a doll when you can press its stomach.
Phil, what do you think of this? Before you say something, because I will probably hop off here in 2 minutes without any word. Before you say your thoughts, I just want to share. This is why I have a concern of having mental health experts be sent to a place where somebody is known to have mental issues, because if they aren't trained to or have the right tasers or guns or whatever, I think we're going to see a lot of mental health experts dead. I could be wrong.
We should point out that most police departments have egregiously low standards of training with a sidearm.
Sure. And
It's
again, that's why it's
low.
good.
Just from the standards of somebody who grew up with guns and is a recreational shooter. Looking at what these standards are, in terms of their performance at their range, and then how often they need to train. So it seems like it would be trivially easy to require anybody like this sort of mental health professional to additionally get basic open carry training that exceeds what police departments currently require.
For sure. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. I hear about that a lot.
What do you think about the idea of drafting officers? Like, just you go into colleges of people who are, taking, they're in law studies, they're in psychology studies, they're in anything relevant, and you say, listen, we'll pay your college bills. We just need you to be an officer for a while, as opposed to going and getting soldiers to be officers. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I'm sure Jeffrey would have some thoughts on the idea of a draft, reinstituting a draft.
No, I'm sorry. It wouldn't be drafting. You'd be offering to pay for their student loans if they would be willing to serve as an officer for a time.
I feel like there's probably some benefit to having the people that are going to be police officers, people that have a dream of having that job. Now, similar to military, there's probably going to be some assholes that just want to have a gun and drive a fast car and speed home with their lights on or whatever. But your average person, I hope, and I'm guessing, wants to do good and wants to fix the world and wants to just I don't know. I only personally know a couple police officers, but I guess I would just rather there be less in like financial incentive, like I didn't never want to be a cop, but I'll do it if I get school paid. I could be wrong. I don't think it's a bad idea. I like the idea of people that want to make a change in the world, that want to do good being a cop. They might view bad cops as, I want to be a cop so I can counter that or something. I would rather have those people be officers than just random people that were talked into it.
Okay.
But what do you think of the
Jeremy?
video, Phil? Oh, sorry.
Oh, wait, which video? Oh, the one with the stabbing? This is a video I've seen years ago. This is one of the more famous ones. So yeah, I'm glad that there was a break in the violence and she decided, okay, I'm not Judge Dredd. I'm still an officer, and I'm not going to go around the corner and just shoot her and execute her. I'm going to try to now get a surrender. So yeah, I think that it would be pretty disturbing if we had officers who were like, well, she tried to stab me before, so I killed her now. You know what I mean?
What if she was only going to threaten the dog's life? That guy seemed pretty torn up about that, and I get that a lot of people care about their dogs. I don't care about animals or pets in any way other than the fact that I'm vegan. But like, if the crazy lady was going with a knife up to kill a dog, let's say an officer dog, should you be able to shoot in defense of the dog, or is it not fair to human to dog?
No, yes, you should. And this goes into the point that I think is a thread of thought that we've had throughout this, which is that, you know, if you are the violent criminal putting everyone else in the situation, then your life's not worth the same as everyone else. You know, everyone shouldn't just tolerate it as you go around killing their animals, burning their cars. At some point, you have to be stopped. You know, so if there's a convenient way to stop you that doesn't entail ending your life, that's great. But, you know, if she's about to stab the dog, and you're close enough to have a shot where it's a decent chance that you're going to hit her and probably save the dog, then yeah.
Gotcha.
Just, you know, I'm going to go right back to my vote and say that I pretty much agree with Phil from the standpoint of my own defensive use of a weapon and you know, self-defense constitutional rights. But I don't see the professional status of law enforcement as conferring a whole bunch of special rights, but rather the opposite of, you know, conferring a lot of greater responsibilities, including the greater risk of personal sacrifice, which may explain, you know, the UK data, and that's what that sort of professionalism would entail. And so whatever it would be acceptable for an officer to do in, say, defense of the canine ought to be acceptable for a homeowner to do in defense of their own dog from somebody with a knife.
Would you say that if the police officers do need to put themselves at risk, more like the UK officers, that we should only hire single parent, like childless men as police officers? We can ignore them.
That's not true of firefighters, who I'm quite sure, at least wilderness firefighters, the ones I'm thinking of, I'm quite sure have a greater injury and death rate than police officers.
I wouldn't think so, but yeah, let's look into it.
We can look that up.
But I don't even mean emotionally. Like, I hate the idea that, like, if Phil was an officer, that if he got killed, not only would I not get to talk to my friend anymore, but like his wife and kid are at home. There's this emotional side, which is devastating, but I'm not even talking about that. Like, is it worth it for the society to have to pay the family of dead officers because we chose to put their life at so much risk that there's just dead officers everywhere, and so people are getting paychecks, and then we're having to get new officers while paying dead officers, essentially?
I mean, it's like you see it's like you instinctively just perceive the absence of unqualified, you know, strict authority as just utter chaos, you know, war zone Mad Max kind of devastation. And
I'm not saying utter chaos. There would
You know,
just,
it's-
with how you're describing it, I think instead of 200 cops dead a year, it'd be more like 400
Like the
to
UK.
800 or something like that.
Well, what does the UK do then? I mean, they're not collapsing into Mad Max dystopia.
Oh, sure.
Even if
They're
that's-
just
even if that
having,
statistic that
they're
you're
just
pointing
paying
is
out,
true.
they're just paying out more to the widows of the cops,
And
which
they're
might be
probably-
fine. I'm just
and-
wondering.
And they're getting a very different caliber of person becoming officers,
Yeah.
deciding to undertake that professional responsibility. I imagine,
And they have
that-
more alive criminals and murderers.
and
because we're
completely innocent people and mentally ill people and various other human beings who themselves can be harmed, because it's not only the cops are not in the position of a firefighter where every other human being in their society is the fire. We're not a fire. We're also humans capable of being damaged and having our lives snuffed out by this self-styled superior caste.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I don't think you're crazy. I think you're wrong, but I don't think you're crazy. I think there, like I said, I try to view every case as somebody near and dear to my heart, that I wouldn't want anybody to die in these situations. I just would much rather somebody that is going to make our society more chaotic die than the person that's trying to help our society.
It's interesting that you use the word chaotic, because I was going to say, I think we're often somewhat talking at cross purposes, or we're talking with each other, we're communicating, but we might not be able to really reach any sort of greater agreement beyond a certain point because of some kind of like personality psychology, some dimension of authoritarianism, where it's like
just what I imagine is best.
You're just like much more frightened of the chaos of not having the authority figures' instructions instantly, clearly obeyed than I am. And I'm afraid of other opposite sorts of things very much. I'm afraid of middle school bullies being handed the authority over life and death just because they went through a very brief
I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of that too.
Training program and got a badge pinned on them.
I don't think there's many things more important than having like body cam and all these different things to control the potential abuse of power. If every police officer became the greatest thing ever to your satisfaction and you loved everything about every single one of them, I don't think we should go, oh, okay, now things are great, we can remove the body cams. Removing the body cams would create bad people because humans have flaws. And so I think we need to control things the best we can, film everything, fire the people that should be fired, and the people with the power, the law enforcement, they should be like, we should be breaking down everything they're doing way more stringently than anybody else. But then also separately from that, I think we need to have these things in place that gives everybody the right to live and to if you risk somebody else's life, yours might get taken out. And we have to have these rules in place. This might be the deontology side of me, but the idea of not being killed, not being enslaved, not being physically harmed, we should all have that. And when somebody goes against that, they should be stopped the best way possible. And if they aren't letting themselves be stopped when they're trying to kill us and harm us and all these different things, come at us with knives, then they have to be taken out in whatever way possible, even if it's death.
How about when the people who are doing exactly what you described are the ones wearing the uniform, are in the blue caste, and somebody else with the capacity for self-defense against them is in the inferior castes, the Dalits like me. What if the guy with the camera who was filming the brutal beating of Rodney King decided to protect Rodney King and potentially protect himself and others around from these lunatics by shooting all of those officers.
Well, I think it's clear that in
Would the
almost
same
all
standard apply, or would the Dalit not
Yeah.
be punished more for killing the Brahmin than the Brahmin for killing the Dalit?
So there's a couple things. I think it's clear that in almost all cases where it is clear that the police officer is in the wrong, they are fired and various levels of punishment. Also, I looked further into the pension thing, and I can't talk about
Yeah,
it
that's
now.
not what I
but
asked
we
you,
should
though.
talk-
I asked
Well, hold
you,
on.
what
I
if
know.
the-
I know.
What if the guy, instead of filming those
I know.
guys,
I know. I
kicking
heard
the
you.
shit
I heard
out
you.
of Rodney King,
Jeremy, I heard
and
you. I heard
shot
you.
them
I
and
heard you.
controlled the situation?
I do not. Yeah, I know. I heard you. I do not think it's smart to ever try to physically challenge an officer, whether you are the one being harmed or you're witnessing harm. Now,
Of
I'm
course
not
it's
saying
smart.
I'm not saying it's not. In some cases, it might be the morally best thing to do.
It's not smart because they are treated like a superior caste. It wouldn't be
They
smart
should
for
be.
a Dalit to shoot a Brahmin. Who
They
was
should be.
kicking
It should
fellow
be.
Dalit.
It should be a bigger punishment to shoot a police officer than to shoot a non-police officer. I think they are a higher caste. I think they are more important. And I think it should be a bigger deal to attack a police officer. Now that's complicated, and I think we should go into that in the future. But so the first thing I'd say is what I said, which is I don't think it's smart. I think everybody should just be relaxed, get taken to jail, do whatever they got to do, fight it later, fight it legally. But yes, in a society, I would want those officers removed immediately. We can't make everything perfect. We probably shouldn't have RoboCop cops. So we get officers in there, and if they fuck up, we really should have in place what I believe Phil wanted to put in place, and I think you had something really similar, which is when they fuck up, instead of being able to move to a new town or a new state and become a cop again, they should lose their cop license and not ever be able to do that again. And that might not be enough. Some people might need to go to jail. I think Derek Chauvin's like in jail for life. I think a lot of officers will get 3 years here and there, 4 years, whatever. And there might be more punishments that need to happen. But no, it's to stay away from the chaos. What I imagine in my mind, the best thing to do is to not have citizens think they know best about what they're witnessing and try to take them out. Because I think the officers in some cases might actually be doing a Rodney King situation where it's not good, but something might look exactly like Rodney King where that needs to happen and you can't realize from your far distance what's going on. But I do got to run.
Okay.
Isaac, you should share some thoughts right now. Isaac's kind of quiet and waits till he's called on. So you guys should invite Isaac into the conversation as much as possible. I love you guys. Have fun.
Enjoy.
Isaac, did you see the sick ass fight?
I did not, but I think I'm actually gonna
And
go
what
here.
the cops
too.
did in the end.
Yeah, what happened?
You didn't see the Korean street fight?
No, I did not.
It's so culturally interesting, like how this fight develops, and then also the reactions of the bystanders. There's like these girls that are like standing by this food stand, and these guys, they start off shoving and trash talking each other for quite a long time, and then one of them throws the kick. Since pretty much all the kids like learn taekwondo, there's a lot of kicking involved in these kind of drunken Korean fights. So they start kicking each other, and then one of them kicks the other back and knocks him down like next to the food cart, right in front of these young women who are just standing there, and they're just like, oh, that's annoying. They don't seem scared. They don't jump back, even though it's like a foot or two away from them. And then eventually they're like talking to each other. Should we go this way? No, we can probably get out this way faster. And then they just walk away. Act like it's no big deal.
The videos in Paris where there's people just like sitting at the coffee shop while there's like a riot going on in the background, fires. They don't even care. It's just normal for them.
Yeah, but then so then the kicking escalates, and one guy seems to take like a really bad like liver kick kind of thing in his side, and but then the guys are back up trying to go at it, and then these two cops come up and basically just like spar with the guys a little bit. The cops are like completely keeping their composure. Right at the beginning, one of these two guys in the fight, right as the cop goes up to him, knocks the cop's hat off, and the cop just like steps back, and then like a bystander picks up the hat and hands it to him, And then they just go right back. The cops are like speaking really calmly, and then one of the two guys that had been in the fight starts swinging at a cop, and he's drunk, right? So the cop just like keeps stepping back as the guy's swinging at him, and then about the third time, the cop just does like a judo flip, takes the guy down on his back, and then the second cop does a kind of lesser version of the same thing to the other fighter.
It is worth noting that Carson's not here. I said it did seem less violent. He thinks it was just as violent as our police, but in different ways. And he was pointing out that after the guy is down, the cop starts grabbing a hold of his hair and yanking his head back.
Oh yeah, that was part of their
Yeah.
their submission there. Yeah, he had his arm, and then he was That's I remember that too. And and you see the other one that was in front of the elementary school.
I don't believe I saw that one.
This guy had a deadly weapon. I couldn't really make out in the video what the deadly weapon was, but it said in Korean, brandishing a deadly weapon in front of a elementary school. So the cops are surrounding him with their batons, and they're just like whacking. They just like keep whacking this guy on like the shoulder and the arm. They just hit him with the batons, and so it's like, when have you been hit enough that you've had enough? And then one cop has like this big old, like, seems like PVC pipe or something. And he's like 3 feet long. He's like whacking at the guy, and then the suspect grabs the pipe away and starts like trying to swing it at the officer. And then I think the officer just manages to grab it back from him. But there's like all of this long interaction where, U.S. police would have had their firearms out, and the main thing they would have been doing is shouting, "Get on the ground, get on the ground!" And the Korean cops aren't even doing that at all. They're just like hitting them. But then, that situation also clearly goes like well past the point where in the U.S. it would have been taken as justification for lethal force for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And they do end up swarming him. They do end up like whatever was in his hands, like they managed to like hit him enough. They managed to get him to drop it or like stumble or something. And like the very moment that he's no longer in control of the situation, the cops are just like all ready to seize on that moment, and like eight guys swarm him. It's pretty interesting how it's these some countries seem trained in this wait for that moment, and then everybody has just a very like collective like instinct to swarm the very same moment.
I had heard before this. I had heard a lot about swarming in the UK. I wasn't sure how prevalent it was worldwide.
Well, I mean, that's definitely what you see in that elementary school video. I don't know what this
I must have dropped here.
what this guy was threatening to do, or maybe I did.
Yeah,
Well,
I think I'm.
anyway,
Yeah,
guys,
I need to watch more Korean, please.
I think I'm dropping. Do I keep freezing?
go
Not
up.
for me,
I
Phil.
posted all those to the Facebook. I don't know if I only posted it to Carson, that one. Maybe I should go check that, because I may have posted them all to Carson and only like one of them to the.
I know that I'm not in
Main
that
chat.
group chat, so
Okay.
yeah, I just get emails from Carson, so because I don't have a Facebook account or whatever you need. But anyways, I'm gonna actually hop off here. It's been a nice talk.
All right.
See you guys
Thanks for
later.
joining, Isaac.
Yep.
Thanks for being on here, Isaac. Catch you later. Yeah. I don't know, the issue of the broader issue, Phil, of how much can be accomplished, like debating specific issues beyond a certain point that has to do with personality psychology.
Mhm.
Somebody that's just got somebody's got a higher like conscientiousness score than somebody else, or higher neuroticism score, or whatever. I don't know where authoritarianism, how that relates to big five personality traits, but you know, what I'm what I'm saying is I think a lot of times you start to get a sense, especially with certain pairs of individuals within our society here, you get the sense that they're talking on the wrong level because they've already said everything that there is to say on that level, and addressing the differences would have to be at the level of their underlying personalities or something like that.
I wouldn't say that you're necessarily wrong either about Carson or about myself, because I am probably more toward the authoritarian end of it, but there is a risk in pointing to sort of, it's not by any means an insult, but it's literally a kind of ad hominem in a way, where like you hold these positions because this is your personality.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the actual argument. And
I don't think that's not an ad hominem fallacy. It may not usually be a valid argument, but it has more.
Well, what I mean is, if you were to point to the personality instead of addressing the argument, right? You can tendentially say, oh, by the way, I think that you perhaps hold these views because you have a more authoritarian personality.
Yeah.
That's perfectly valid, but at the risk, you wouldn't want to risk dismissing an argument and instead saying, well, this is just because you're an authoritarian.
Well, no, that's not I'm not claiming that's a justification for dismissing an argument. I'm claiming it's a kind of a reason to expect that you wouldn't convince a particular person.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and it's also not, it's not giving up on the person. It's thinking that the disagreement that's really going on is on a level that can still be discussed, but discussed in a very different sort of way. Like we kind of having like a like group therapy where we talk about like, what does it feel like to you when you feel like there's a chaotic situation that can't be brought under control? What does it feel like to you when there's somebody who you think ought to be in charge and people aren't listening to them? And then you would ask me questions like, Jeremy, what does it feel like to you when somebody is abusing a position of power and acting superior in a way that disregards the fundamental values or interests of the people that they have power over, or something like that? Because these kind of things might be the way to get at what these disagreements stem from.
If let's say you're shopping at just a store. Matthew's up, so if he starts crying real quick, I'll have to go. But let's say you're shopping in a store, you're walking out of the store, and clearly there's been some sort of mistake with the officers, because you're just shopping, you're walking out of the store, they run at you, they have guns drawn, and at that moment they're like, get on the ground, get on the ground. Does it feel like they're abusing their power at that moment, or are you thinking, oh my God, like I hope that they're not distracted with me, because clearly they're looking for someone much who's actually a criminal?
Well,
do you feel aggrieved at that moment, or do you feel like, oh shoot, they're making a mistake?
Probably a combination of the two.
The combination of the two.
Probably more like the latter, because just because of the relative risks involved or whatever. If there's something like an active shooter,
Hmm.
um,
Or just someone who has a warrant who they're looking for.
yeah, I mean, it starts to get different when I'm already on the ground, but then I'm trying to inform them that it's not me they're looking for, and I may have seen the guy, and then they're telling me to shut up, you know, and getting more physically aggressive with me as the result of my talking, it automatically assuming that I'm a perp who's lying, and retaliating against me for for what's actually the truth. Meanwhile, letting the actual criminal get away. Yeah, and I think that kind of thing happens a lot because of this authoritarian mindset and this like us versus them mentality, where everybody is probably lying to you and probably waiting for the moment when they can pull out their concealed gun and shoot you dead. Everybody who's not an officer is the worst case scenario potential, and everybody who is an officer is the best logically possible justification for their behavior. This is the kind of mentality that gets applied when there are two tiers of person, two tiers of status.
I don't get that vibe from officers. I've been pulled over before, and I have astigmatism, so this car behind me had its brights on, and he must have put it. Maybe it wasn't his brights, but it seemed bright to me. And I just pulled over. I was going to let him pass, and he didn't pass. Instead, pulled right up behind me, and I was like, "What the heck's going on now?" And just stood there. I sat there. I was like, "Is he not going to pass me?" So then I started to pull away from the shoulder of the road, and then he puts his lights on. He puts his beacon on. He's a cop, and so then he pulls me over, and he wants to find out. He thought it was suspicious that I pulled over, and at this point, I didn't get a chance to even tell him. I have astigmatism. That happened later. First, he's asking, where am I going? What am I doing? Where's my license and registration? And eventually we just end up in a conversation, and I forgot where I was going with this whole story, but I don't know. But I don't know. I just had a lot of interactions with the police, and I never that's not true. Once in a while I feel like they're aggressive, but it just seems to be across the spectrum. One guy was a real dickhead, for some reason. And others have been like, just the vibe you get once you start talking to someone and you realize they're just really concerned. I was rolled up on by an officer. I was already pulled over. And I eventually found out just through talking to him, he was mainly concerned that I might be thinking about like killing myself or something. I don't know. I guess it was just the look on my face when he came up to the window. So it's just the interactions I've had with the police have just been across the board. Very different kinds of people, I don't know if you feel that way, but.
Well, I think part of my perspective is probably this comparison between rural deputies and metropolitan police departments. So I come from a really small town in the mountains. Mm-hmm. So I have these memories of interactions with deputies who, if they're not from this town, are often from one of the other smaller towns. So they're part of sort of the broader community and culture. And so they're cool, right? They identify themselves as part of the community, and they also have a very direct feedback. Anybody they stop, they probably know a whole bunch of people that person knows. Mm-hmm. They probably know some member of that person's family, and so there's all these cool interactions with rural deputies, and then you get the contrast whenever I've dealt with a officer from a larger city, and so maybe that makes the metropolitan police seem so much worse in the interaction because of this comparison, this contrast. And then also now, I haven't really had a lot of conversations with Korean police. I think I've seen Korean police in action in person several times. Usually what I've seen them doing is drunk driving checkpoints, and so I've seen several arrests like that, and I've definitely seen people aggressively swearing and shoving officers not get aggressively slammed to the pavement or anything like that, but the officers just kind of like take the shoving and the verbal abuse, and then keep their composure. Don't start the escalation of U.S. police to come on a scene and immediately start shouting, barking commands, compared to what I've seen from a lot of other countries where they're like, "Hey, what's going on, man?" Even while the person they're approaching is loudly swearing at them, and really agitated. The cop is just like, you know that I can't let you do this. Like, we're gonna have to take you in. And then the guy like shoves the cop a couple times and keeps swearing. The cop's just like, while other cops are amassing around, he's like, still like trying to talk the guy down, still kind of de-escalating, or not, at least not escalating the situation. And then the times that I've seen, like, the cops do manage to talk the belligerent drunk person down. I've never seen the one where they actually have the situation where they actually have to do a judo flip to subdue him. But what I've seen is de-escalation work over and over, and up to and including when there are actual low-level physical assaults against the officers, like a hard shove. So witnessed that firsthand, and then in addition, these videos. So I've seen this. I've seen this point of comparison here, and then I did one thing that really gets my goat is like this. Carson started to do it. He didn't really do it this time, but it's come up in conversations in the past where people make this move to, it would be stupid to. You'd have to be really fucking stupid to shove a cop. Well, no shit. I'm an American. I know. I know that in the U.S. I'd have to be really fucking stupid to shove a cop, no matter how angry I was. I know that, but that practicality is not. It's not a legitimate part of the argument that the cops should, pull their guns on me if I shove a cop. Making that move from the morality or the ideal procedure to the wisdom or stupidity of a citizen's response to the nature of policing in their country. You understand what I'm saying, right?
Yes. Do you know if your mic is really low?
Of the question when people do that.
Do you know if your mic is really low? Because I keep having to hold it up to my ear to hear you.
Oh, is it better now?
It's about the same, but that's okay. I'll just try.
Okay, that's weird.
I actually agree with Carson though that I would rather lose. I don't want to say criminal. Remember, I'm not trying to. It's very important to me that we never accept the idea that police are in a position to punish anyone for anything, right? It's about stopping a danger to themselves and to others. But I would rather lose the subject that they're dealing with, the suspect, I should say, probably. I'd rather lose that person than lose the officer. And so when we bring up like statistics about the UK where they lose so many more officers, then I think, well, it makes our system look better, even if it's offensive to people who don't like
Yeah.
authority and don't feel like if an officer walks up and tells you to do something, why should I obey him? Who gives him the right? I'd rather live in that kind of society and lose fewer officers.
I think you can't avoid the question of how likely you sort of subconsciously think it is that that person on the receiving end might be you, or I'm not saying literally you, but somebody like you, like the kind of person that you might project yourself into when you think of a hypothetical person in a hypothetical situation.
Mm-hmm.
And like I defended myself, or not defended, but I clarified against Lewis that when I talk about problems with police accountability, I'm not tying it to some notion of institutional racial oppression like BLM. I don't particularly like BLM for various reasons, but mostly because they remain silent about virtually identical cases just because the race of the victim in that case is the one that they want to portray as the oppressor race. Happens to more similar cases happen to more white people and black people. The rate is higher for black people because, the rate is higher for black people, but not much higher, like 1.5 times higher or something like that. And that ends up translating into it happening to more total white people. And yet they don't become national news stories or spark huge protests in major cities. So okay, that was a long introduction, but even though I don't like how organizations have gotten extremely wealthy and caused a lot of problems racializing these issues of police lack of accountability, there are still big demographic differences that are relevant to how people imagine like projecting themselves into a situation involving police. And being a middle-aged white guy from a mountain town is going to lead me to subjectively project myself into a hypothetical situation very differently from a 20-year-old black man in a big city. And what pops into mind when I think of interaction with the cop, it's probably going to be like, they stop me because I'm pulling a little like a trailer with some firewood and the tags are out of date or something, and the cop is not going to start off that interaction aggressively. They're going to interact with me as if I'm doing something normal that they themselves do or that their neighbor does. And we're going to have a conversation about where I got the firewood and how good quality it is and shit like that. And the young black man is probably going to get just verbally treated like shit over and over throughout his life, maybe a couple times a month. Somebody's gonna stop him and immediately start the interaction with a disparaging sort of tone, and that's just gonna low key build up. All the times when he was powerless and he was treated as an inferior category of human being from the outset. And so you should keep that in mind, just like explicitly and very consciously, since I think we can't really do it subconsciously.
Oh, I agree. We can't do it subconsciously. We also have to take there are these second order and third order knock-on effects of racism too, where I remember I approached someone when he was just a black guy in my department store, well, in my hardware store, looking at a saw, and I said, "Can I help you?" And he suddenly got a look on his face like, oh, he's touching the equipment. And I said, he goes, "I'm sorry." "You're sorry? Like what? Like he apologized to me, and he had nothing to apologize for. Like it was my job to come up and see if he needed help at all, you know. But his expectation was like, oh, I'm like I don't know. What struck me about it is he did not have a chip on his shoulder. He just came up and he thought that he was doing something wrong. And so that to me struck as like it felt like it was an effect of racism. And it hit really powerfully because it wasn't directed at me as being his enemy in any way. It was just his expectation that he's an object of suspicion. And that like was something I'll never forget.
Yeah. I've had
But there are other
or two, yeah.
Yeah, there are.
In the
You go ahead, sorry.
context, in the education context, in the U.S., yeah, I witnessed things like that going on. Just different behaviors that kids have been taught, based upon that similar sort of default impression that other people have of them, or that they think other people are going to have of them. And it builds up, it has to build up. And the other thing is, in terms of respecting authority in a lot of different contexts, not only police, but, Carson has said things in the past, like you've just got to respect the authority. You've got to follow them, and then you can deal with it later in the courts or whatever. But another thing is that just sort of cultural differences and like dialectal differences are gonna be easily interpreted by certain authority figures as a disrespect and like lack of control over the situation.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not, if they're expecting, some officer is expecting like every word out of a citizen's mouth to be like this, the bad stand-up comics impression of a white person, like super stick up his ass, like ultra polite and apologetic or whatever. That's just not going to happen out of the mouths of a lot of people.
Some people, and I do have to say, I behave that way toward police, and there's not a hint of like, I don't feel obsequious whatsoever. It's really addressing an officer that way and saying, "Yes, sir," "No, sir." This isn't just about my respect for them. It's about my respect for myself, because that's how you should address an officer, So that's just a cultural difference too, whereas someone else might see me and like, look at this guy saying "Yes, sir," "No, sir," answering all the questions. He's a bootlicker, like, someone else's perception of what I look like talking to that officer is completely different,
Yeah, and I imagine, that there's got to be individual Black people. Yeah, I'm not saying the cultural norm or that they all would, but it's understandable that there would be some of them who just would intimately tie that to Jim Crow, to segregation, to, like old Hollywood movies about like the happy house Negro,
yeah,
being obsequious toward the master of the house, because it does have that linguistic connection, It's not crazy that they would be making that association and really, really not wanting to participate in it.
hmm It wasn't that long ago that I was just at this local casino we have here on the reservation, and you know how I don't know if it's like this in your part of the country, but you always politely hold the door if you're the first to the door. There's somebody almost there, you know. I know some areas they don't do that, but I there was this guy who was just behind me, and I opened the door for him or something like that, and I said, well, he said to me, "Thanks, boss," like just the expression "boss," and we both instantly froze. Didn't say anything to each other. We just both instantly froze, and then kept walking. And I know for a fact, not for a fact, but it was because I just helped him with the door, and he with a million other people he would use the expression "thanks, boss." But because I'm white and he called me boss, it was really awkward instantaneously. We didn't even make eye contact. We just kept walking in opposite directions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Yeah. There's that underlying like awkwardness, you know? So.
Yeah, and laughing, awkward laughter, but this is the kind of thing it's hard to talk about in the US climate without choosing the team that you're on. That choosing what the current meaning of team red or team blue and everything that's supposed to entail.
In a case like I just said, I think regardless of anyone's politics, I think everyone would have perceived it the same way. It was almost nothing, but it's just that it's a weird thing that can pop up at any moment. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll just say, yeah. There's so many directions to go and so many dimensions, but talking about police reform, police and prosecutorial accountability, because we haven't even talked about prosecutors. Prosecutors, yeah, sometimes they might face personal threats from powerful gang leaders and the occasional crazy rando, but prosecutors are not like daily in the line of fire, and they too very often occasionally commit very serious crimes against the public to advance their own careers, destroying evidence, fabricating evidence, intimidating witnesses, bribing witnesses, and even though it's only some of them that do it, the ones that do almost always get away with it entirely. And so they don't even have the excuse of self-preservation that maybe a lot of police officers would. And that's a big part of the picture too, is reforming the incentive structure of DAs and prosecutors. But in terms of the larger political issue, it's really, really crucial that speaking about police and prosecutorial reform gets dissociated and kept distinct from like the entire political ideological package that is associated with team left, commitment to BLM and their take on institutionalized racism and DEI trainers and all of this kind of stuff. If the only way that communities can have conversation about different methods of policing is to be a true believer in this ideological cult, then nothing is ever really going to get off the ground. So that is a part, a big part of the picture is, to escape from that tribalism when you talk about important issues like this.
I first ran into a lot of these issues well more than 10 years ago, more like 15, 16 years ago. The case I sometimes bring up is the firing of Juan Williams from from NPR after he was on Fox News and tried to make a point about how, although it makes sense, and he also feels a little nervous when you see people in Muslim garb getting onto a plane. That doesn't mean that they don't have the same rights as everyone else, and you just shouldn't. You know
just
what I mean?
Because he said he felt nervous.
Yeah, and that's why he was fired. With the larger point he was making, that's why he got fired.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there was a professor who I think kept his job, but after a long fight, after defense from FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, maybe around the same time as you're describing, for basically, for an ethics and law kind of course, for saying something like. He's talking about the psychological studies on incest taboos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how you can describe the situation in ways that there's no chance of a pregnancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
They could be the same sex siblings, or they could just be infertile or whatever, or old, and so he's describing that, and he's going, well, so clearly, like, it's disgusting to most people. Incest is provokes disgust, but surely disgust is not a justification in and of itself for denying people the right to do something. I mean, I get disgusted at thinking about two men having sex, but that doesn't mean I think that gay people should have any lesser rights or something along those lines, right? He did the exact same thing. He said, I might have this feeling, but it in no way makes me morally judge gay men or want to take away their equal rights in any way. But he faced punishment just for being honest about his emotion, which is got to be the norm for straight guys, right?
Yeah.
At least feel somewhat disgusted by it.
Yeah, I can remember, being 12 or 13 and feeling like really strongly, viscerally disgusted at the idea of two men kissing, but then just slowly become acculturated out of that disgust. And so the idea that someone who is a little older is willing to just share that their disgust is somewhat, entrenched in their reaction, but doesn't control their.
I don't even know if he was actually saying that he had like some kind of significant disgust. I think he was just saying, like, I might have the disgust, but it's totally separate from my moral judgment or my discrimination against other people,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to draw a philosophical analogy, that's
super easy.
Using it as a hypothetical, but got in trouble for even proposing any kind of like emotional dislike of gay people, even in the context of using it to say that he fully supported their rights and their equal status and their dignity. It's like people can't even handle. It feels like an IQ kind of thing, I gotta say. It feels like there's just people who are too fucking stupid to understand hypotheticals and understand the context in which a particular sentence is raised,
I think it would be, but like it actually feels to me as if it's more akin to a religious conviction. You know, it's more like you're speaking in a blasphemous way. You know, it's like it's like if instead of him bringing up, well, I feel somewhat disgusted by the idea of two men having sex with each other. It would be like if 300 years ago he said, okay, like what if Jesus Christ had anal sex? You know, and
Yeah,
he wanted to talk
I
about
was gonna
that.
say that. You know, what if like what he said, like, I definitely don't believe that the Virgin Mary gave a bunch of hand jobs for money. Yeah.
But
even bracketing it like that would still be blasphemous, right? Even saying that
yeah,
it's something you don't believe doesn't rescue it from blasphemy. Yeah.
yeah.
In Catholic Church. So it's not the literal content. It's the conceptual association that
Mhm.
characterizes blasphemy, right? And something like that's going on in the political polarization
Mhm.
that we're experiencing today in the U.S., right?
Yeah. And the thing is, there's a trendiness in what is or is not considered blasphemous in that kind of socially left religion, right? Like sometimes it's blasphemous to confess to having to literally confess to thoughts that you don't approve of in yourself, as Juan Williams was, or the professor. If they're bigoted at all in terms of race or religion or gender, but then it becomes blasphemous to suggest that you're just like, oh, I don't even see color. I'm obviously that I have problems with people who would say that unless they mean it in a very specific way. But someone who's claiming to not be racist, you know, and that itself is evidence of racism. So there's a trendiness in terms of what's considered blasphemous, you know.
Yeah, those kind of double binds where even trying to defend yourself is proof of guilt. That's one of the scariest things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And to some extent, this is all a social game that's designed to punish those who are least prepared to play that social game, which are, you know, anyone. That's why in a lot of these private schools, they get this kind of education. You know, you're supposed to say this and not supposed to say that. You know, you're a horrible person if you say colored people. You're progressive if you say people of color. You know, it's like
yeah,
the euphemism treadmill is
yeah,
a way to keep the privileged, the linguistically gifted, which to some extent, I guess maybe you and I are, you know, ahead of other people.
I used to say this because, you know, I have a extended Black family. My aunt married a Black man, so I have a mixed race cousin, and then and my uncle was married before, so he had kids from that marriage, and now his grandkids are adults. So and I'm the oldest of my biological cousins on my dad's side, but my step cousins are a few years older than me, so they were kind of like the big kids when I was a little kid. So I'm not. So I'm pretty familiar with like being the only white guy in the room with a bunch of Black people, right?
Mm.
That's what I'm saying. That's not weird at all. And so I used to also often say like, say to other acquaintances or whatever, you know, hanging out with lots of Black people, there was one word that was never ever used and then they get like this scared look on their face, and then I say that word is African American.
Yeah.
Black people and people that are just like comfortable hanging out with them aren't saying African American. never were saying that. It's completely ridiculous. But you know who the people who did like we're very careful about saying African American. Not today, it's different, but like in the 90s or the 2000s,
Mhm.
the people who did make sure that they said African American were like the hyper educated white people around UC Davis who I could make a pretty good guess would not be very comfortable being the only white person in a room of black people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that euphemism treadmill and how it actually kind of often indicates the opposite of what it's what officially taken to represent. Those people were telling me that they're not comfortable with people of other races when they're using this this
The most up to date.
Term of the day. Yeah.
Yes, the most up to date official language that you're supposed to use.
And the people who are actually the most comfortable, least bigoted, least to worry about in any way are if you transcribed out their language, it would look worse. If you put it before the board of censors,
Mhm.
the kinds of conversation that that would maybe shock the censors or provoke scrutiny would actually be the conversations of the people who are most comfortable in a diverse crowd.
Yeah.
And just hanging out with, not seeing race, not that, but but not feeling discomfort and just being around a group of people that you like and can engage with, happily, in normal social ways. So it's really depressing that it's kind of culture wars. Heroes, the paragons of ostensive virtue, are often not very virtuous or good or kind people.
Yeah. I do find though there is sometimes a vanguard, often those who there's a Spanish community in this area, and I often find that those who are quicker to take offense or find microaggressions are those who are less attached to, let's say, than their parents are to Puerto Rico, for example. And being a little bit more extreme politically and taking these sorts of anti-racist positions feels like it's often to make up for their own sense of inauthenticity that their parents or grandparents might not have to fight
Yeah.
for.
This guy who this is exactly apropos to what you just said. This guy, he's a white guy, and his shtick on TikTok or whatever is to wear these ethnic costumes,
Hmm.
like a sombrero and whatever that Mexican kind of shawl is, and then go and ask people like from those actual countries. I don't know if they're visiting tourists or if they're like recent immigrants, but
Hmm.
clearly people who are like actually from that country, not ethnically from that country, but fully English speaking Americans. And so
Yeah.
he's like, he has all these like shorts of asking like some really Mexican guys what they think about a white guy wearing a sombrero, and they're like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, that's all right. If you want to wear that for Halloween or whatever, it's just clothes. And then it's the same thing with Chinese and Japanese and Indian people. And then it's like only the never really lived culturally outside America, monolingual Americans who are so pissed off about that concept
Hmm.
of wearing the wrong non-matching, culturally appropriating clothing of a different culture.
The thing about cultural appropriation, I feel much more strongly about this than most people do. This is not an issue where I think that the problem is that the policing of cultural appropriation has gone too far, or anything like that. I from my perspective, it's just categorically a problem to consider cultural appropriation to be something worth worrying about at all. Partly because it implies that people belong to cultures as opposed to culture belonging to people. And culture has to be something which it's perfectly fine for anyone to simply appropriate. If I want to discover the secrets of how to make a perfect, masala chai, and then I start doing that, and then I open a masala chai stand, and I start profiting off of like this culture of for a very long time of Indians making tea. That's not even a problem a little bit, nor is it a problem if some Indian does it with anything American.
What
And
about if there's some kind of parody that might be taken as insults, might very well imply an insult,
that absolutely matters.
drag queen dressed as a nun.
Yes, that's often a response that I get. But here's the thing, that in a Venn diagram, that falls into cultural appropriation. It does, but that part is irrelevant, right? It's actually just a problem because it's rude, because you're mocking people. That's the only, that's the bubble that matters. The fact that it's also in the cultural appropriation bubble is irrelevant to me, because that bubble doesn't matter to me at all. It's only that because it's rude and mocking people's culture, which remember, they possess. It's not that culture possesses them, it's that they possess culture. And so they identify with it, and when they see someone mocking it, it can bother them. And so that is a problem.
Is it okay to be rude when just like the general occasions when satire and parody serve important purpose? If those drag queens say like we're mocking the Catholic Church because of their covering up of abuse of children and harming people in other ways, and we're making a satirical statement against their like claim to moral superiority. Does that justify the?
Well, I mean, I imagine
type of mockery.
I imagine both you and I agree totally that it's allowed anyway, right? It's totally allowed anyway.
Oh yeah,
we're just saying.
But do you think there's something like still like morally shitty about it, about using that sort of method to try to make that sort of point?
There can be and there can't be. It just depends on the judgment. Like when you go to tell an edgy joke, if you're not willing to be offensive, then you're probably not going to be very funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but you can also decide, maybe it's shitty to tell this gig and this joke in this way. Maybe I should tell it in this way. It's up to someone's judgment. But do you would it behoove someone? Maybe behoove is too strong a word, but would it be a good idea to keep in mind that there are also like innocent people who are part of a certain group who are going to take offense and aren't going to necessarily take on board the satire as it was intended to lampoon child abuse in the Catholic Church, or
I think
go ahead.
we should put a pin in this before I forget, but I think there's a lot buried in this expression "take offense" that it might be very valuable to really try to explicate. And I'm not sure how easy or hard it would be. It could mean so many different kinds of things going on psychologically in the mind of the person. Aside from how easy it is to just use that expression in the public sphere, especially in a polarized society. What's actually going on when a person is taking offense? Because it could range from like a really terrible feeling of like powerlessness and worthlessness,
Mm-hmm.
being devalued as a person within the society. It could be like a really profound negative consequence for the person who's just feeling excluded, essentially feeling kind of exiled from their society. Or it could be, their adrenaline gets ramped up. They get a little bit pissed off. Or it could mean like nothing really bad, but they recognize that this is something that they've been taught they should fight against on behalf of their group, their tribe, or whatever. So the full kind of range of effects seems possible, and more and more I try to put a pin in these sorts of highly ambiguous terms that disguise their ambiguity when they arise. So I always want to ask somebody like what they mean. What do you mean by people could get offended
when I take
by a sculptor putting a crucifix in a jar of urine or whatever? What's actually happening to you? What are you suffering? How are you suffering?
What I mean when I take offense, Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
I want the details, not just the words that this sculpture called Piss Christ was offensive. I want to know like what damage it's causing to Catholic people. Is it like only when they're looking at the sculpture, or does it like linger with them like all day long? They they can't shed this pain that's like as bad as a toothache because months ago they learned about this sculpture.
All right, so we all have our own definitions, and I think you're right that some people are just taught that they should be performatively offended at X, Y, or Z. As a Catholic, growing up Catholic, I was never offended at Piss Christ. I remember that was in the 90s, wasn't it? It was like a long
something like that. Hell yeah, I'm fucking old, man.
Yeah,
I got on my hair.
So I was never offended at Piss Christ. I was never offended at like, oh, priests are pedophiles, But what triggered offense in me as someone who grew up Catholic, and it's interesting because what I mean by offense is the physical reaction, right? The emotional reaction of I can feel my face getting hot, I can feel adrenaline, like my hand might shake a little bit. I can feel my face getting hot, and I'm having that kind of emotional reaction, right? Offending, right? And offending can then veer into anger, or it could veer into sadness and withdraw, right? But it's that initial emotional negative feeling that can veer in those different directions. And so the thing that I thought of when you were asking, like, what is offense for a Catholic? It is not someone who's trying to offend like that, but someone who genuinely tries to convince you that Catholics are not Christians. Okay, that always got really under my skin, like, you know. But piss Christ, no. Claiming that all priests are pedophiles, no. It's almost like it's difficult to be offended if something is too over the top. It's like, well, okay, you know, who cares? But if you genuinely think that, like, Catholics are not Christian, that pisses me off.
But
You know,
here's
what was
the
that?
other thing, though, man. You're maybe not that typical of a person,
Hmm.
and probably in terms of IQ, in terms of certain, you know, core personality dimensions. You know, to what does it take and what does it mean for a person with an 85 IQ to be offended by something that's related to their identity, their self-concept? You know, it's probably looks very different because they just don't have the same facility with treating hypotheticals as hypotheticals, you know, with bracketing off satire. They take things a lot more literally.
Hmm.
And they have fewer boxes that things can get slotted into. And yet their well-being still matters, right?
Hmm.
So do you think you need to take account of the negative consequence of offense in the minds of people who are much less intelligent than you are?
I worry that too much self-editing would be a problem in itself, but I don't see a problem in principle with what you're saying. No.
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of think about it in the context of little kids.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Not like Matthew because he can't even understand the words yet, but
Yeah.
but
Like,
yeah,
like you don't joke around
in
about
a
like
few
divorcing
years.
his mom or whatever.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, there's certain there's a whole range of things that you're not going to say around a 3-year-old in the context of what to an intelligent adult would be like the most obvious sarcasm.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're too dumb. you care about their suffering,
Yeah.
and you know the relation of the things you might say to suffering is different in the mind of somebody who's really dumb. But the thing is, there are adults that are really dumb throughout our society too.
Mm-hmm.
Consequentialists, we don't just want them to be suffering, right? Because they saw like a Louis C.K. stand-up act and too stupid to understand his jokes in the proper context.
Mm-hmm.
And they literally think he's saying that slavery isn't that big of a deal or something. You know, it's funny, but there's fucking people who are like that, man. They're walking amongst us like a zombie movie.
Yeah.
They're taking your order at the fast food restaurant sometimes, but they're the kind of people who need like a week's training to be able to use the register. But we, you know, they're still sentient beings whose well-being we need to care about.
Mm-hmm.
and offense is one of the things that hurts different people in different ways.
Let me just text my wife. You can still see me, right?
Oh yeah. We might as well. We probably should wind down because I actually I need to use the bathroom, but then also I need to eat. I haven't eaten anything yet today, so.
There was one thing I wanted to bring up really quick, and maybe we won't have much to say on it, but do you remember Fernando Castile?
Oh yeah, Philander. This is the guy who had a legal firearm in his car and had informed the officer of that. And while he was doing everything that he needed to do, this cop freaked out and shot him in his car, right?
Yeah, and the important part, he was doing everything he was asked, right? And he was even told to stop reaching, which is a command that makes sense if someone's arm is in motion, right? But this cop, who was just too nervous, kept shouting, "Stop reaching, stop reaching." And in fact, his hand was already on his wallet, right? In sort of some shade in the car, in a shadow. And what he did was he froze, which is a reasonable reaction. You don't know if stop reaching means show me your hands, or if stop reaching means I'm worried you might have your hand on a gun already, just freeze, right? So he's hearing stop reaching, and he interprets that the exact same way I would have, which is just freeze.
Yeah.
And so he didn't move, and the cops started shooting him. And it was one of the most outrageous killings. And that, so that I think he would be alive right now if he were white also, but that was sad. That was the one that really pissed me off. I never made any threats toward police officers, but when that killing happened, my dad saw the look on my face, and I remember he wasn't going to let me leave the house because of how mad I was. He thought I was going to go on an anti-cop rampage and go try to find a cop to kill. And I've never made a threat like that, but he was just, he couldn't believe how angry I was. But that was my on-ramp into paying closer and closer attention to police issues. And now I am where I am today, where I'm like, oh, the police genuinely, for the most part, are the good guys. But that was a horrible killing. So,
I think, there's just we covered all these dimensions before, but just one final thing I want to reiterate as the general principle is that Americans are highly prone to tunnel vision about the way things might be done, and often react to proposals as if they were fanciful hypotheticals or pipe dreams at worst, that are actually being employed throughout the world, often to very, very good effect. This comes up in
healthcare too,
in how the prison experience could be done. It comes up in proposals for much lower sentences for even serious violent crimes, as if these are just some crazy radical left philosophers instead of the norm in many European and East Asian countries. And then it comes up in how medical systems might work, what patients should be allowed to do themselves and what family members should be allowed to do within a hospital setting. If I describe to you the norm in many Korean hospitals, your first reaction would probably be that it's complete lunacy, and you'd start thinking of all the obvious serious problems that would arise if anybody ever tried to institute such a crazy setup in terms of patient freedom and the role of family members in providing basic care. And and yet it's going on, and I promise you that the medical system overall feels better and runs more smoothly in South Korea than it does in the US.
Mhm.
But if I started telling you the specifics, that kind of tunnel vision would kick in, and even though I'm telling you that it's actually being done in a country of like 45 million people, there's this American reaction that if it's not the status quo here, then yeah, it must be madness, and that American reflex to always immediately jump to the to the excuse for why it couldn't work here.
Well,
Of course, it couldn't work here because we're different. Well, everybody's different from everybody, South Korea is different from Denmark too, but that doesn't mean that South Korea can't learn important things from Denmark and vice versa.
Yeah, I've run into that. Like, I think you and I might actually agree on a lot of police reform, but we're very different in terms of the sentiment that we have toward police. I do have that same sort of status quo bias is something I've seen, in other countries. And it was interesting. I was watching some, what do they call the parliament in Europe? I mean, the actual European one. I don't remember, but they were saying, we should institute these new rules about campaign contributions and how you keep track of them. And their argument was like, no, we just couldn't. It's totally impractical. But then somebody else stood up and they were like, this is exactly the way it works in the United States. They can keep track of who donates to your campaign. Now, most of the time, it's going the other way is where I see it as a problem. Is, as you said, Americans are like, oh, this is totally impractical. When in fact, if you just look at how they do it in other countries, it could work. But I just wanted to point out it goes the other way too. That it's amazing sometimes the way that we do things here, and in frivolous ways too. Like, I was speaking to a German girl who thought it was awesome that here in the U.S. you don't have to, when you move into a new place, you don't have to like buy new cabinets or find a way to bring your old cabinets from your old house into your new house and arrange them in such a way that it makes sense. Like, you just leave the cabinets for the next person to buy the house.
You mean built? I thought you were talking about built-in closets, because that's unusual in Germany and
like kitchen cabinets.
European countries. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think they almost always have like a freestanding wardrobe in their bedroom. Built-in closets are like a weird thing to a lot of Europeans.
I like the idea of the standing wardrobe. It's like, why design your house so weird that you have these like little cubby areas? I don't know. I guess it works if it's above a staircase or something, but
But yeah, on that main point, there's some good cultural stuff here, but just like it was I should have reacted more strongly when you guys brought up this statistic of fewer police officers killed in the US than in the UK. If that's really true, that's pretty striking. I wonder how much that includes like traffic accidents and other stuff too. I have to look that up, but because that would be a pretty striking statistic. But still, to be in a position where you're presenting that as your good statistic in a country whose statistics about crime and violence and use of weapons and incarceration, it's just completely off the charts shitty. Like you literally have to go to failed states or complete totalitarian despotism in order to find another country that has statistics that look worse than the US. And then to be thinking that this rate of deaths by police officers, which, you know, in absolute terms is a low rate, you know, somebody with that authoritarian kind of impulse is going to want to emotionally perceive it as a very high rate, but it's actually a very low rate. If you're not freaking out about all the people that McDonald's is killing, not to mention the non-humans, but all the humans that they're killing with heart disease and diabetes, then you shouldn't be freaking out by that rate of police officers losing their lives in the US or the UK. And to be pointing that out is like the positive about the way things are done in the US, when in terms of violence and crime and punishment, we're just straightforwardly a shithole country. It's just really bizarre, you know. The UK doesn't need to learn as much from us as we do from them, and definitely, you know, Denmark and Germany and South Korea don't need to learn as much from us as we do from them across the board.
Well, these are, like, I know you're probably sick of people who are saying, well, like, what about the demographic differences? But if you are in Vermont or Connecticut,
oh yeah, then it's as safe, if not safer, than most parts of Denmark, right?
Yeah,
or just like many college towns that are close to big, large cities, but still your risk within the college town is much less than the city that's just 20 miles away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because despite I got this argument, like I think like either before the 2016 election or shortly after Trump had been elected or something like this, in terms of Trump's wall, you know, I got this argument with my conservative aunt, and I said, like, first I said, you know, we don't have borders between the U.S. states. Any gang member from the south side of Chicago could get in the car and drive all the way from there to here in California where we are, and there's no checkpoints in any of those state borders to stop him. There's no walls, you know, and yet you don't seem freaked out about that. There are no walls between the most violent criminals in most violent U.S. cities and us.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just like just registered, like, we're like 30 miles from Stockton. You know? Stockton, California was like the murder capital of the U.S., you know, within the last decade. I don't know how many years, but it's in the running there for per capita homicide rate. And we're sitting there feeling completely safe, you know, in the Sacramento River Delta house or whatever. And then there's like the murder capital of the country half an hour away. And nobody's freaking out. Nobody at that party or whatever it was wanting to build a wall around Stockton or thinking that that's a political priority. So it's interesting how you can have these very dangerous places and very safe places separated from one another, and they're essentially culturally separated. They're not separated by walls or checkpoints, or they're not even separated by like criminal punishment for if you were to be caught going from one place to the other.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it doesn't seem to be a fallacy or a mistake, though. Like, sometimes you're worried about the criminal element coming in. Other times this is a big theme with sort of people moving from the north and from the coasts into the south and into Texas, and turning these states more blue, and in particular, turning these cities more blue that then have different policies. And they see in their real lives the difference in attitude toward shoplifting and homelessness and all of these issues that really have an impact. It's like people move from California with liberal attitudes into Texas and make it a different kind of city that that has an impact. You know, it just matters when populations move. Is what I guess is what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But there's a lot of different things you could say and different ethical levels. You could say people don't have a right to not be influenced by other people. People don't have a right to control changes that are coming about as the result of the choices made by other people.
Yes, I absolutely. As a matter of fact,
especially when you're
I agree so strongly.
Responsibility, take personal responsibility to deal with the changes.
Yeah, I agree so strongly that my point is you manage that at your border. Now Texas can't say to anybody from California, you can't come here, but you can say it at the national level. You can say, well, you know what?
You can.
I don't know. I don't want to pick on any particular country, but let's just say Venezuela because they happen to be in South America, and
why do you have
to
desperately try to do something just because you can partially do, and in effect not incompletely do it? I mean,
yeah. I mean, I'm not an advocate for a closed border. If that's what you're saying.
When I was talking about like personality types, I just don't have that kind of reaction that goes, we can't control this, but here's this one level where we can kind of partly start to control it, and feel this.
But it's not authoritarianism, right? It's not the need to control. It's not like there's this deep-seated need to control. It's that we're looking for a certain outcome, and
it doesn't feel that way to me. Maybe with you, maybe you could convince me that you are thinking as a what cold-blooded, what do I want to say, like cool-headed, as a cool-headed statistical consequentialist. You might be able to convince that about yourself, but that doesn't seem to describe most of the desperate wall builders who I know, who that seems to be like a linchpin of their political ideology right now. Most of the Trump supporters that I know in my family and in my community, they are acting like losing control or changes to your surrounding is in and of itself an existential threat.
Well, I can tell you that insofar as I support the wall at all, because it's not like a super important issue to me, but insofar as I support the wall at all, it's more of a oppositional reflex. So it's not cold and calculated or cool-headed as much as the idea where, wait a minute, there's someone out there saying that it's racist to have a wall, right? And that you're an ignorant asshole if you want a wall.
Well, sure.
And I'd pound my fist on the desk and I'd say, all of a sudden, I give so much of shits about this wall. We have to build this wall, right?
Well, yeah. But that's the tribalism, Yeah. It's I'm perfectly capable of thinking that the wall was a stupid idea and a waste of resources, and personally being in favor of very strong open borders. And also think that it's ridiculous to think that the only reason anybody would propose a border wall is racism. Yeah. Even if that person is themselves Hispanic or something, Yeah, you don't need to jump from opposition to one tribe's policy to being a full Kool-Aid drinking believer in the other tribe.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. It depends what kind of people you're dealing with. You know, if you're the thing I point out all the time is that, you know, people, especially online, get into arguments about like which tribe is the more oppressive in society, or something like that,
Mhm.
and oftentimes both of them are right for their respective locations, and they're just not taking that into account. You know, if you are living in certain you know, hyper educated towns in California, and you were anything less than a fully committed leftist, had any sort of politically moderate doubts, you know, then you would feel like there is leftist oppression all around you. But if you were in rural Arkansas, you know, the same person would feel like they're just the most off the charts, like progressive, like individualist outlier, just because their life doesn't revolve around church and you know,
Yeah, I can feel.
even if they're religious, they're not completely 100%, you know, washing the blood of the lamb, right?
I can feel my own biases coming into play when it comes to that sort of a thing, because often voices from the right that are these very traditionalist sounding voices, they often, their message goes in one ear and out the other. They sound like they're just NPCs repeating like some nonsense, you know. And it maybe that has to do with like that offense we were talking about previously. It's harder to take offense to people on the right for me. But when I hear sort of like counterfeit intellectual ideas, like critical race theory, which absolutely was taught to me in college, and then to hear people on the left saying, "Oh, critical race theory, that's just a, you know, mythological boogeyman on the right. That's not even a thing." You know.
Well, it is a mythological boogeyman if you're living in the non-major urban regions of the South,
Mm-hmm.
or the Midwest, where if you're a slightly left-leaning person, the real daily threats to you and to your children's education are not critical race theory. They're creationism. They're bullying for not going to church, like physical bullying for not going to church, which is largely condoned by the teachers, who are all religious. You know, these kind of, when people that are moderately on the left and have these sorts of experiences in those parts of the country, you know, they can describe their own reality, and then somebody from the generally blue coastal states is going to read some of those stories and think that can't possibly be true. There can't possibly really be bullying of, you know, of an atheist student, physical bullying that the teachers accept. But I've talked to enough of those people. I've seen enough of those anecdotes. It's clearly going on, and both of them are going on in different places. And so it's hard to avoid the 5 blind men describing an elephant parable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, rope, wall, trunk.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but that's sort of my frustration. I've probably said this before. That's my frustration with the left, though, is Like in the 90s, I figured it was just obvious, not being racist is the means not treating people differently based on race, or at least in the same ways that we've talked about that previously.
Yeah.
But then, and that's what I see as the elephant. But then, you realize years later that there are certain people who are like, no, what, like white people are the problem. That's racism. And they're touching a completely different part of that elephant. And I'm the one who thinks I see the whole elephant. It's treating people differently, So I don't know. I'm rambling now. So
Well, it's like with the it's like with this TikToker with the traditional dress associated with different cultures. People from those actual cultures not seeing a problem with it, and insulated, overeducated Americans being the ones that have a problem with it, even though it's not actually touching them. I think you get that. You ask like, if you ask normal Black people, can Black people be racist? They're gonna say, hell yes, they can.
Yeah.
My uncle hates Chinese people.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can give you examples because they live in the real world, and they use these kind of terms in the real world.
Of course,
Not Abramex candies or whatever running around.
let's see, that's probably a bad example though, because they would say that that's true. Not only, can Black people be racist, certainly toward Chinese people in the United States, but Black people can be, without realizing it, they can have internalized racism, but their whole point is that they just want to make sure that you never see white people in a white country as victims, of any kind of racism. That's the
That's not a thing that normal sane Black people who don't have a vested interest in this kind of ideology are ever going to say.
Yeah,
they're not going to say like if in a high school a group of 5 Black kids like singles out the white kid because of his race, and then they start the fight and beat the shit out of him while yelling slurs. That a normal Black person is not going to say, nope, that can't possibly be racist because of these definitions. No, they're not. Saying sanity and common sense is going to prevail, and the people are going to have no trouble identifying that as a racially motivated attack and calling it racist. Phil, you gone? All right. Well, that was real. Once again, we solved all of America's problems in 3 hours. You're welcome. You're welcome, folks. Fellow senators of the Society Project, I will see you next time. Peace.